G'day guys, how are you going? So if you go over right now to the NA server website, you can see that starting February the 22nd of until March the 5th, you can get an Object 252U Defender from their premium store. For those of you who don't know, the Defender is the most overpowered tank at tier 8 at the moment. And how it's overpowered can really just be highlighted purely within its stats. Firstly, it has incredible armor. Frontally, it is almost impenetrable unless you shoot the lower frontal plate, which would usually be fine, except without angling the lower frontal plate, you're getting angles, or you're getting effective penetration values of about 220 millimeters, which is absolutely absurd. The sides of the tank are also incredibly strong. It has troll armor on the side, spaced armor, meaning that shots just get lost or bounced all the time, and also it's got quite strong side armor as well. And then to top it all off, the rear of the tank has incredibly well sloped rear armor, meaning that you can get some pretty crazy angles of around about 200 millimeters of effective armor. It is just absolutely insane, the armor on this tank. In fact, many tier 10 tank destroyers would have trouble going through the front of this tank. Secondly, it has a pretty great gun as well, with a base penetration of 225 millimeters, a pretty average DPM though of 1,835.43, but it has a huge alpha damage of 440 damage per shot. The IS-3 has a similar 122 millimeter cannon on it, and yet it does 390 alpha damage, whereas this tank does 440, meaning tier 6s are going to have most of their health wiped off, if not all of it. Tier 7s are going to have half of their hit points at least wiped off, and a tier 8, such as the new ELC, even 90, is going to have half of its hit points on a bad day taken off from the tank. Mobility wise, it really isn't a slouch there either. It has 35km top speed, which isn't that great, but for a heavy tank, that's actually not too bad at all. It's got a pretty decent 13.59 horsepower to ton ratio and a pretty crazy 29 average traverse speed, meaning that tanks really can't get around the side of this tank, and they can't really attack it frontally, but even from the side it's going to be pretty much impossible to penetrate anyway. So really, when you look at the three kind of vertices of a triangle, the 3 points of a triangle that makes a tank, its gun, its mobility, and its armor, this tank really excels in armor, it excels with its gun, and it does very well with its mobility as well. And as a result, it really is quite off balance, because most tanks will be good in one or two of those things and they're very bad in something else, but this really does it all very well. And if these stats don't convince you that this tank is overpowered, have a look at the stats of the tank on VB Addict. The average server win rate of this tank is 55.4%, and a balanced tank should really be as close to 50% as possible. Now, 55% may not sound like a lot more than 50%, but it actually is really high. Especially when you compare it to things like the Lerva at 49.8%, the Mauerbrecher at 50.3%, and the IS-6 even at 48.5%, and so on. And so it really becomes clear that this tank is performing quite a lot better than existing premium tanks, or any other tank really at the tier. So the reason that I'm upset about this tank being released is really because it's just so grossly overpowered, and it just continues to further break the already shocking tier 8 meta of the game. When I was in Belarus meeting with the development team, they knew that this tank was overpowered, and when we would bring up tanks like the Nameless as being overpowered, they would say things like, well, at least it's not the Defender. Further proof that this tank is stupidly overpowered, if you're not convinced already, is that at the EU at the moment, on the EU server, if you go onto the website, you can see that they are holding a charity auction. There are 2 tanks up for sale. Of course, the first one is the Object 252U Defender, and the second one is the Su-76I, the tier 3 insanely overpowered Russian tank destroyer, premium tank destroyer, that was released for less than 24 hours before it was pulled out of store because it was just so overpowered. So the EU staff know that this tank is so overpowered that it can be classed with the Su-76I, and is therefore going to appeal to enough people that it can make a lot of money at a charity auction. Like, they know that this tank is overpowered, and that's why they're selling it, because they want to make a lot of money, and they know that the way they can do it is by having this very overpowered tank go for sale. So to reiterate, Wargaming really knows that this tank is insanely overpowered, and as a result are using it to make quite a lot of money as a one-off thing. It's kind of like if they sold a Type 59 for charity auction as they did back in the day. And now they're bundling it up with this incredibly overpowered tank. Now I guess luckily for us, this is only being released on the NA server, not the EU or Asia servers yet, but I really hope that this never comes back to the Asia or EU server, because really if it does, it's just going to completely mess up the already bad tier 8 meta of the game. But I want you guys to tell me what you think. I'm going to leave a poll up there somewhere now. You guys can tell me what you think. Should this tank be reintroduced into the store? I personally think no, but some of you might disagree with me. I suspect that those who do disagree with me want it to come back so they can purchase it if they don't already own one. But please, Wargaming, for the sake of your own game, do not reintroduce this tank back into World of Tanks. Rethink about putting it back on sale. It is stupidly overpowered. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.